This is going to be a very quick video. I mostly just want to show something that I've mentioned in a few videos prior, and people have asked, hey, where is that? So I will show you. In the book on Demonology by King James, very fascinating book. Not one that I really have searched through intensely, just one that I've skimmed through, and a lot of it is stuff where I don't think you need to go in there and be looking at the details of what's happening, but who knows? Um, Maybe, I don't know, just me personally, I like just very broad understandings of the evil stuff. I always think of the quote from Jesus to be as wise as a serpent, but as harmless as a dove. And it just makes sense to me that, of course, we're not supposed to like research the dark arts intensely. And of course, it's like you can't wallow through a pigsty without getting a bunch of pig crap all over you. You can't go deep diving through evil things and expect to come out clean. So I just keep that in mind whenever I'm researching something like this. And I think that the reason that the main message for me in this demonology book is what I'm going to show you today, because it just has everything to do with transvestigation / eugenic programs / resets, history resets, and the types of things that are happening at these times. And yeah, I believe that eugenics is a real thing, and that it's one of those things that they talk about eugenics like it's a future thing. Like, oh, we need to be really careful about what we're doing today because we might be going into dangerous eugenics territory. And I think that the deception there is that this isn't a future thing. This is a past thing. There's nothing new under the sun. Eugenics is old, and many eugenics programs have happened, and I think that eugenics programs are an essential part of history resets since I don't know when, but authors like Aldous Huxley make it clear that they know about these very real eugenics programs that already happened. When these authors write about stuff, like, it's the same thing that I think about 1984. Even just the date 1984, that came so quickly and left, and what, we're almost 40 years past that by now. When that book was written, all of those things were already happening, and the author wrote it, George Orwell wrote it as this like dystopian future thing, but it wasn't a dystopian future, it's a dystopian present. These things are always happening and have always been going on in modern times. And so let me just show you the part of demonology. Something that is more common like these days is the Alex Jones type stuff, the water's turning the frogs gay, and things like this. Environmental toxins, alarming impacts of pesticides on male fertility. There were some really scary articles that I was reading about entire projects, I don't know what to call it, agricultural projects, where entire groups of men are just sterilized from the pesticides that they use, or fungicides, I don't know. But, and they're sterile for life. They're exposed to certain chemicals that make them sterile for life. And I think this does come into it, too. The World's Fair, it was a strange phenomenon. It gets brought up constantly with history reset narratives and what was really going on for these world fairs. I think that the world fairs were a history rewriting moment, and where they have to take all of this old tech and pretend that it was just made last week. I think that's what a lot of these exhibitions, they're showing off the old tech that they've been able to refurbish enough to be shown off, and then they say, yeah, I made this last week. And this shows you that the very early World's Fair stuff had premature babies that were exhibited off, and it's exactly like premature babies today can be saved using incubators and stuff. So that's nothing new. That's kind of a magic trick of doctors. They make stuff smell like rubbing alcohol, and they make stuff shiny, like metallic and stuff, and they use big words, and they do all of this stuff to make you think that it's high tech and that it just happened, and that people in the past were wretched and didn't know anything. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. Something that I've been recently thinking about is like organs, and I think that a lot of those old cathedrals were places of healing, and I think that they would use sound to heal people. Ultrasound technology. Aren't there these interesting, what they pass it off as like high tech, where they use like certain sound waves or certain vibrations to target cancer cells and stuff. Who knows if those old cathedrals were used to, think of those old cathedrals with a pipe organ just blasting at full volume. Maybe that was breaking up some cancer inside people's bodies, or who knows. But I think that they had healing properties. Anyways, I guess I already got into some tangents. That could be a future video to explore. Were those cathedrals places of healing, and were they using vibrational healing technologies? I think it's very possible. But anyways, the point I wanted to make with this is they were able to do crazy things in the past that people today would assume are very modern and only very recent. And it's weird how technology comes and goes like that. Like when do people think that having like a preemie able to survive, when do people think that came into existence? They probably would think that, I don't know, in the 50s or the 60s or something, or even later than that, when technology really got good at having preemies survive. But hey, people were doing it in the late 1800s, and they probably were doing it before that too. So, another question that I've heard people bring up: where did all the people come from in the history resets? We look at the photos from the early history resets, and there's often like tons of people just standing around, and you're like, what are you doing? It always felt so awkward to me, those old photos. And yeah, it's either you'll see these giant cities with like one person in front of the buildings, and like one horse carriage and some junk in the road, or you see like a group of people with like tents set up in areas, and it's just strange vibes. What was going on back then? But that the large crowds that would sometimes appear, and the people look like lost and confused, so that's odd. And then also the orphan trains. Where do these children come from for all the orphans? The questions, I don't know. Were they manufactured? How many of the baby boomers were manufactured? That kind of, the baby boomer thing gets into the Freemartin thing, because I think that was a big Freemartin thing. The baby boomers pump out, where they're making sure that they're creating large amounts of Freemartins at a certain time just to overwhelm the population. Anyways, if you have no idea about this Freemartin thing that I'm talking about, go check out my video, The Secret Explained Simply, and it goes over that idea. So here it is. It's actually, what is this video about? Demonology. In the book on Demonology by King James, I mentioned it earlier, how it's a book that I didn't dive deep into because it gets into sigils and summoning demons. This is something that King James was having to deal with. Real witches, and they were summoning demons. And he mentions the exact type of thing that you'll see in video games, satanic video games and satanic media. All the drawing the circles with the sigils and summoning demons. That's what the book on Demonology is largely about, that. And it gets very specific and into different things. I don't pay any attention. And it is dangerous territory. I just like to give warnings of, I don't think that we should own all sorts of books on dark magic and be looking into that stuff. In fact, that kind of turns me off when you see a researcher or a truther where it's like, I feel like you're a little too into this dark stuff. Like you know a little bit too much information about this. So stay as harmless as a dove in all of your researchings. So it can be really hard for some people to read this because there's going to be a lot of switch ups in letters, but you get used to it. Like the U is what we would think of as a V today. Like here we get slaves of the devil, but it looks like sloughs of the duil. So you got to get used to that when you're reading real old King James stuff. It's kind of easy for me though. It doesn't bother me that much. So here it is. It's actually in the preface of the book. It's not in the Demonology book at all, this important thing about eugenics. And I think it was like on the second page in my book or something. I don't know. Just skim through the preface if you have this book. So here, I'll start reading at and such like in the second book of witchcraft in special and fifth chapter, I say and prove by diverse arguments that witches can, by the power of their master, cure or cast on diseases. And the Bible supports that even wicked people will be able to cure diseases sometimes. And that's why God gave us discernment and why we need to test the spirits. And not everybody who claims to be good is actually good. And that's a big problem with society at large, is that there's this big push for nice being the most important thing. People think that if somebody can have an outward appearance of being nice, then that makes them a good person. And people also have this false idea if somebody doesn't come off as nice, that they're somehow a bad person. And that couldn't be more wrong. And you need to use discernment and be able to look at people. Like, just the perfect example of that are all the TV pastors. I've always felt deep within me that those people are snakes. They just look evil. You don't even need to hear what they're saying to know that some people are evil. And they get us to ignore that by promoting nice as being the most important thing. And not disturbing others, not causing a scene. But just think of Jesus was constantly, not that Jesus was being obnoxious or being overly rude or anything like that, but sticking up for the truth and being righteous is often going to be met with flack today. Jesus was constantly being chased out of places, people trying to kill him. And what did he ever do to deserve that? Anyways, what this reminds me of too is all of that medieval stuff, the witches stuff, it's real, and they just try to play it off today as nonsense, but I really do believe that witches and them brewing potions and dark magic and stuff, I really believe that these people took it seriously, and I believe that demonic stuff was really going on. And I just think of the Old Testament, and Pharaoh had sorcerers, and the Old Testament's full of sorcery and magic. And okay, yes, now, so I'm reading again, starting at now. Now, by these same reasons that proves their power by the devil of diseases in generally, is as well proved their power in special, as of weakening the nature of some men to make them unable for women, and making it to abound in others more than the ordinary course of nature would permit, and such like in all other particular sicknesses. So this right here shows that they understood hormones and, scarier stuff, like being able to poison men so that they're totally unable to be with women. And yeah, that happens today with stuff like pesticides. So who knows? Back then they would brew a potion. What's the difference between a pesticide and brewing some gnarly potion? Everything comes from Earth somehow. Everything is natural. You know how people get stuff wrong? They're like, oh, natural versus unnatural. what physically exists that's not natural, that doesn't come from nature at some point. And oftentimes, uh, so many drugs, everything has to come from the earth at some point. So people get this false idea that like science and magic science today is magic, basically. And they think that science and super smart brainioids are creating the chemicals of today, when really it's no different than alchemy of times past and trial and error and mixing things together and seeing what happens. And think of all of the knowledge that's been lost in times past, the burning of libraries. And sure, maybe the package that it was in was a little different. Maybe they didn't have modern doctor type equipment, but they would have their own version. How often do you research stuff and you find out like, oh, there's scalpels made out of obsidian. Okay, so they had obsidian in times past. They could have had a scalpel, just maybe it was made out of something different. And slicing people open and stitching people up isn't as high tech as people might think. Hormones don't have to be as high tech as people think. Just because it comes in a prescription bottle, Freemartin. So one of the biggest female hormones they get from horse urine, and they probably would chop off testicles and do things to get male hormones. Things as simple as pine pollen is testosterone. So anyways, this turned out to be kind of a big ramble just to show off one thing from Demonology, but people have been asking for it, so here you go. It's in the preface of the book on Demonology. King James makes it abundantly clear that he knew about witches messing with hormones and turning the frogs gay, basically, type ideas, where taking men, because who knows, maybe they would do this to entire populations. They would go and poison the well, and all of the men all of a sudden can't get it on, and boom, that population is decimated right there. And I could see them doing this to all male populations that have existed in times past to usher in their Freemartin armies. And I think that you could also easily create Freemartins. I think that this is how Freemartins were created, were through hormones, taking a female fetus, and the pregnant woman is taking male hormones, and it flips to a male. And I think that you do that enough times, and biology is not how they say that is. It's much more adaptive, and you can change your body in real time in just one person can change themselves by doing things. And I think that they can pass that off to their children. And I don't believe in the Darwinian natural selection where it's all driven by death. I don't believe that at all. Archers, just for instance, I'm just throwing this out there. They can tell when somebody was like an English longbowman because their skeleton is literally different than the other skeletons. It's larger in the shoulders, and one of their shoulders is bigger than the other one. I believe that if you do that for enough generations, that you could actually, they would start having children that are better suited for that. I believe that's how God made biology and made this place adaptively, and that it doesn't take Darwinian, the archers that didn't have this weird extra large right shoulder, they died because they weren't as attractive they weren't as good archers, so they died. And so the ones with it, I don't believe that at all. I think the idea that they mock, like biology, they like to mock the idea of giraffes getting longer necks from like stretching their necks out. They mock that idea, but I think that probably is the real answer. And that if an animal is consistently stretching their necks out more and more and more, that they'll just naturally get larger necks from doing that. And that in real time, if a human is always doing an activity, that they can actually change their physiology. And I think that changed physiology can be passed off. So I think that the Freemartin thing could be passed off too, that you just end up getting these women that trigger the male hormone release in utero. And I think that it probably came about artificially by people taking hormones. Anyways, hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope this was helpful to some people that were looking for that part of demonology that talked about this, because it's not even in the book. It's in the preface of the book, which I find interesting. God bless everyone.